would it be so bad?
I love that song.
There's a lot of ancient wisdom in that song, and it matches everything that we believe today. If I were a rich man, wouldn't it be wonderful? Think of all the great things I could do. Think of the image I could project. If only I were a rich man. We get confused between wealth and money. We think of them as the same, when in reality our wealth is not tied to money at all. Money is a way of keeping score, and it's certainly nice to have a lot of it, but it doesn't help us to have a lot of it if we don't know how to use it, and if we don't know how to live, and if we don't know who we truly are. We know people who are wealthy, we see them in the news all the time, and we wouldn't want any of them as friends. And we know people who scratch from day to day to get by, who are the salt of the earth, that we'd do anything to help. Our title, How to Reverse Financial Adversity, when I saw that come up on our list of themes that Science of Mind Centers were going to be talking about this week, I kind of cringed for two things. Number one, I hate talking about money. I hate talking about wealth in that way. And number two, financial adversity is something that is just uncomfortable for everybody to talk about. And I'm not really going to talk about reversing financial adversity, because the subject has nothing to do with finances. It has everything to do with recognizing who we truly are and recognizing that our prosperity has nothing to do with money. Our prosperity is all about knowing that we are spiritual beings, strong, and that we are loving beings who are stewards of the earth we live in, stewards of the communities that we participate in, and are all about being a conduit for nothing more than love. And that as a conduit, our responsibility is to keep the channels open, to keep the channels clear that allow our prosperity to flow in. And how do we do that? By making sure there's nothing stuck in there, like an artery that's building up with plaque, cutting off the circulation of our blood. We have to keep that cleaned out to keep ourselves healthy. We have to keep that cleaned out to keep the blood flowing. In the same way, we have to keep our spiritual conduit clear so that our prosperity can flow in. And we do that by letting it flow out the other end. I've talked to you before about how my lovely India loves to keep a clean house. And she's always reminding us, as my daughter especially, nothing new from Santa Claus until there's room in the bedroom to put it, you know? So always be reassessing what's there. And spiritually, we clog our minds with ideas. We get them from the common consciousness, we get them from our daily experiences, we get them from the stories that we read or see on TV or in movies. Ideas of vengeance being good. And even this morning I heard someone who talked about how good religious people can be supportive of self-defense violence. And I'm not going to tell anyone here not to defend themselves if they're physically attacked. Absolutely, we have the right to do that. And yet if we go back to the early tenets of Christianity, what's that image in the Colosseum? The lions. And the Christians that were the pure Christians of the time, literally offering no resistance to being slaughtered because their belief was such that they had to remain in peace, and that their life, their physical form on earth, was not important. But going to their reward, if you will, at peace with themselves, that they did not lift a finger in violence, was important to them. And they were willing to die for it. And willing to see their friends die for it. And willing to let their friends die for it. Because that was the true nature of their belief. They may have been onto something. And I'm not going to tell you that we need to be that passive in our daily lives, but we need to be that passive in our daily minds. When we're insulted, when we're abused, protect ourselves physically, of course, but carry that baggage the rest of our lives, that's taking poison and expecting somebody else to die. Keeping circulation open, giving love, allowing the love to just come in one end and go right out the other. Like a lot of my teachers' messages did when I was in school, in one ear and out the other. You know? But this is a little different. This is actually giving of our soul, of our heart, without any expectation of a reward. Simply showing up and being. And being willing to receive. How many times have someone offered you something, a little reward, a little perk for something, and you go, oh, no, 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 please, no, it's from my heart. Okay, great, it's from your heart. What if they insist? You know what, I say you get one refusal of a gift. You can say, no, 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 it's okay, fine, I'm fine. And if they're okay with that, then so be it. But if they said, you know, if they've got the money in their hand or whatever the gift, and they say, no, I really want you to have this, take it. Allow them to give you something. Allow yourself to be in receipt of something good. I mentioned this before. eBay is out there for everybody. If they give you something you don't want, re-gift it. You know, sell it. That same fruitcake is still in circulation. You know, that we all got for Christmas once and gave to somebody else the next Christmas. They last forever. Just keep it moving. We misuse our power, our spiritual power. We forget that we are here to love. And sometimes we put out in the form of a prayer that we need to have something or that we want to have something. And then we get real specific about what it's supposed to look like. In the song, he was describing a certain visualization, and that's certainly a tool that we can use to kind of acquire those things that we think would make us comfortable, to kind of have that picture of the yacht and the sailing into the sunset and all of those good things, and keeping that image in our mind. But if we are so focused on the yacht that we miss out on the little rowboat that is being freely offered, we're misusing our power. And a solution lies in our own beliefs. When we live in the solution, when we live in a world of love and peace and joy in our own minds, we can only project that out into our experience. Principle does not have problems. Principle has no way to associate with a problem. So as we train ourselves and become comfortable living in our principle all the time, the problems dissolve. When we focus on love. Tom was reading earlier from Spiritual Economics. I'm sorry, I'm sitting here looking at the page and I can't find it. Spiritual Economics. And talks about letting go of the old belief in the grace of poverty and the subconscious sense of guilt in having things, along with feelings of unworthiness, attitudes that have such a detrimental influence upon human consciousness. Claim your entitlements, he writes. I am a child of the universe, richly endowed with the fullness of all good, a child of the universe. Can you get that into your consciousness? Can you get it into your everyday thinking that I deserve everything that I need, everything that I want? I am perfectly able to acquire the means to have these things, to have a comfortable life. God doesn't want me to suffer. God doesn't want you to suffer. Suffering is not in principle. Principle is about love, prosperity, joy, knowing what we need to know when we need to know it, having what we need when we need it. That is the joy of principle. There's nothing in principle that says you have to earn it by suffering. You have to earn it by knowing it and believing it and embracing it and letting go of everything that isn't like love. Letting go of all the things in the closet that you've been stuffing away thinking they might be important. Beliefs like, I'm not smart enough. I'm left-handed in a right-handed world. Trust me, there aren't too many left-handers lean on that very much. Because we're actually better than everyone else.
There you go. Now you got it.
Just one point to another.
Yeah.
I'm left-handed for now.
Yeah. And of course, we can't even say that, can we? Because that puts us separate from the others. And that's not where we want to go. You know, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells us that we should go the second mile to do more than expected. And the author's asking, is this some pious, abstract, underground truth? Or is this perhaps one of the clearest assertions of economic law? After all, what could be more successful than a retailer that gives more value? Now, you've all heard me talk about my revelation of I can be healthier if I drive past McDonald's instead of going in. Well, I can also tell you my revelation of I can acquire more pleasure in my little sin if I go to a different hamburger shop that makes a better burger, in my opinion,
Five Guys.
among others, for roughly the same price. So I tend to go there. We go where we get the value that we expect to get. We go where somebody is a little better at customer service. My gosh, isn't it wonderful to go into Best Buy or someplace where you don't really, I know a lot about tech, but I don't know everything about tech, and I know that there are 20-year-olds out there that can run circles around anything that I ever knew. Yeah, and it is just so refreshing to have somebody come up to me and say, how can I help you today? What do you need? What are you looking for? And then let's figure this out together. And, since they're not on commission, they're not trying to make a sale. And it's a great way to run their service. You go to Costco, and everybody who works there loves working there because the company is so good to its employees that there are very few that are disgruntled employees, and they're very pleasant to work with on a daily basis. On the other hand, I understand that there are certain shops that wealthy women shop in that if you don't have the right purse or the right earrings, you may not even be greeted, let alone served. And is that the kind of place you're comfortable? Where what you present determines how you're treated? Now, we all make these judgments based on appearance. That's obvious. We see somebody coming down the street that's scruffy and unkempt, dirty. We're gonna give them a little wider berth probably, especially if we've got our young children with us or something like that. But on the other hand, if you've got a flat tire and you're on the side of the road and this person walks up to you and says, "Can I help you?" You're probably not gonna turn them down, you know? All depends on your circumstances. You know, our consciousness is what defines what we experience. Eric Butterworth continues in the spiritual economics, he goes, you know, we ask for water from the faucet by turning on the tap. We ask for light from the lamp by throwing on the switch. He reminds us that Jesus said, again, the teacher Jesus, "It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." That certainly does not sound as if he expected us to engage in special appeals. He even said your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Then why need we ask at all? He's asking us. It is obvious to God asking was simply a claim of entitlement, a receptivity of consciousness. It is creating the condition in mind that makes the result inevitable. We talk about spirit as being this all-knowing, all-having. Every question we can think of is already answered in spirit. Every condition we can imagine is already in existence in spirit. It is infinite, isn't it? We keep saying that and we keep forgetting what infinite means. We can't think of something new. It already exists in spirit. The answers, the questions, the conditions, the solutions already exist in spirit, have since the beginning of time, and will until time ends. And being infinite, neither one of those points exist. We talk about people that say, "I thought of that idea a long time ago." And yeah, you did, but you didn't have the wherewithal to develop that idea, so now somebody else is raking in the cash. But at the same time, that doesn't mean multiple people couldn't have had the same idea and developed it differently. History is full of major inventions that developed simultaneously around the same time. Somebody had better PR, their name's in the book, the rest are scratched. It's just the way it is. But in spirit, everything already exists. The kingdom is available to each and every one of us by simply setting in our own mind the receptivity to it. So if your focus is on finances, do your meditation on finances. Put into spirit some sort of affirmative prayer, you know, to the effect of, I know I have everything I need. I know the wealth of spirit is available to me. I know that I am prosperous in every way. I recognize that my relationships are my prosperity. I recognize that my good health is my prosperity. I recognize that I am open and receptive to prosperity and that I share it freely, unconditionally, simply allowing it to flow through me. And then meditate on that for a while, perhaps. That's a tool we use a lot, and some people really seem to enjoy different forms of it. I like a little music. Some people like to stare at a candle. Some people like to hold their fingers like this. Some people just cross their legs or just sit in a comfortable chair. Trust me, if Buddha had had a lazy boy, we'd be thinking about meditation a whole lot differently than we do now. And I do steal that line from Dr. Lockhart. Thank you, Jim. But what are we doing when we meditate? We are listening to the silence. The silence that is spirit screaming in our ear, screaming into our mind. The answer is here. Your next move is right here. Pay attention. Pay attention. The grateful heart does not need something to be grateful for. when we are gracious and give thanks for everything that we already have. Just being grateful, being a gracious heart, is a reward of its own. We don't have to say, I'm grateful for my new car, or I'm just grateful to have a car. Just be grateful, constantly. I took a deep breath as I walked outside this morning, and the air was crisp and clean, and it felt so good. And I didn't have to say, thank you, Lord, for the wonderful clean air, but my heart knew that was a good feeling, and that made me happy, and I was grateful for it, without having to state it, simply accepting it and allowing it to be. The grateful heart does not need something to be grateful for. One can be grateful with the same spontaneity as being happy. Mr. Butterworth continues. We see a puppy, we smile. Well, not only be happy with the puppy, but be grateful that we saw the puppy. The puppy made us smile. And he concludes with, money is good. You don't have to feel guilty about having it. It is a currency or creative flow of divine activity. We use money as a way of exchange. I was watching an episode of Mysteries of the Abandoned yesterday. And they were telling us about this fleet of wooden ships that we find out through the course of the story were built, abandoned, burned to the waterline, and allowed to sink in place in a little bay up in, I think it's Chesapeake someplace, so I'm not sure exactly where. But the story behind it was there's over 300 of them. And during World War I, they needed ships to move goods over to Europe for the war effort. All the iron shipbuilders were busy building combat vessels. There wasn't any more material available to build merchant ships. So the call went out, let's go back to building wooden ships. And unfortunately, as the story develops, the people that built wooden ships were all in their 80s and 90s at this point, and really there weren't a lot of skilled people to build wooden ships, so they weren't real good at it. And the plans that existed from previous ships really didn't exist. So much work had been done on the heads of the people that did it. But imagine what happened as these 300 and plus, there were more than 300 actually, ships were being built. Somebody had to design the new boats. They built several different models, so a lot of people were involved just to design. Wood had to be secured. Lumbermen had to go out and get the lumber. The lumber had to be shipped to where it was going to be shaped. It had to be milled. It had to be transported. Therefore, they needed coal for the trains. They needed coal for the new steam engines that were being built. They had to mine the materials to make the metal, to make the steam engines and the other iron fittings that went into the ship. All of this had to be transported. All of this had to be fueled. The shipyards needed to be powered. This is all money in circulation. Millions and millions and millions of dollars, and this is back in the 19-teens, was put into circulation. So at the end of the day, when the war ended and they didn't need the ships and they became a hazard to navigation because they kept breaking loose and floating down the river, that they decided to just sink them in place. And people thought, what a waste. What a waste, 300 perfectly good ships just burned to the waterline and allowed to sink. And yet, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars had circulated simply because those were built. They weren't wasted. They boosted the economy. And they gave work to people that needed work, and they gave pride to people who needed pride in doing what they did to support their families, to have enough money to be generous to their communities, and to have the pride of being able to create something. So what seemed like a waste was really an economic boom. Everything we do in our minds is an economic boom. We create with our love. We create with our spirit. And as we circulate it, we receive it. Nature abhors a vacuum. when we flush all that love out of our conduit, it has to pull more in. It has to, the way we're designed.